Hello, I'm here with Fiona Charles again for Let's Test interview. Thank you for your time, Fiona. Appreciate that.
Most welcome, Duncan.
So how are you doing? How's life in Toronto? Are you in Toronto at the moment?
I am. It's been extremely hot, and now it's pouring with rain, or at least it was a few minutes ago.
Oh, so is that clearing the mugginess?
Well, it might. It might just start it up again.
That's good. But so is that normal weather for the time of year?
It is, unfortunately.
Ah, right.
Maybe early for this, but yeah, that's summer in Toronto.
Well, that's good. Is that a typical summer? Yeah, wet and warm.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Cool. Okay. So obviously you're here for some Let's Test conversation. I've been to both Let's Tests, as have you.
Yes.
I just want to just talk about the vibe in general, just what you get from it, from being there.
It's wonderful. I I think it's fair to say it's the best conference I've been to, and I hesitate almost to tease it apart and say why. Because it's like a system. It's like an organic system. There's no one piece I think that really stands out. Although I suppose the quality of the exchanges is really important. I think that the fact that it's held in a venue where people are thrown together and can't escape is probably also very useful. Although that would be just awful if it were people you couldn't stand. But the reality is, it's a very open, a very enthusiastic, and a very passionate community, and we all have lots to say to each other, and that's a really neat thing to be part of for a few days. So yeah, I think the quality of the exchanges, the quality of the presentations, of course, the fact that they come out of people's experience directly, and that they're facilitated discussions. So it really is about a true conference. It really is about conferring. I think a lot of new ideas get generated, and that's really wonderful to be part of and to watch.
And I guess,
Don't know what else to say. Oh,
sorry, I
the
guess
food's
that comes. I guess that those new ideas come out of the energy as well. The people are so willing to share their ideas. Uh,
yeah,
and because you see the passion with the way they're sharing those ideas, you get absorbed into that energy, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have to say it's the best conference I've been to, but then I'm biased because I haven't been to any others.
I've been to quite a few others,
Yeah,
um, big and small testing conferences. Cast is good. And Let's Test in many ways comes out of Cast and how Cast is done. I think the internationalism of Let's Test gives it just a little extra oomph.
so is
And
cast generally
and
quite American? Is it?
pardon me,
Is cast generally quite American?
inevitably,
Yeah,
not entirely though, and it has typically had a fairly strong European component, certainly a strong Canadian component.
of course. Yeah, it was good to see a kind of a greater North American presence at Let's Test this year.
Yeah,
I think last year it was just Michael Hunter and a few others, and obviously the Canadians were visiting, but this year there's a lot more presence.
yeah, the Canadians go and inflict themselves everywhere.
I wouldn't say inflicting. I enjoy the Canadian company. Excellent. So yeah, and you like it from an art perspective as well, don't you? Sort of the different kind of statues are there, and the art tour and the surrounding area.
It's fascinating. It's very interesting because the venue in Sweden is a folk high school, former folk high school that was founded by, I understand, by a federation of trade unions
Right.
for adult education, and the art is it's art celebrating the dignity of labor, which is really cool, I think. And it's an extraordinary variety of it: sculptures and paintings and bas relief on the walls of the classrooms. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's probably quite good to look at whilst you're giving the session.
Hmm.
Give you some more inspiration.
Certainly adds a little bit.
So 2013, you did a tutorial and a session.
Yes.
So we'll start with the tutorial on learning to say no. Uh,
Uh-huh.
how did that come about? How did you decide that you're going to try and do that you are going to do a tutorial on learning to say no? Is that some experience that you've had recently, or talking to people?
Partly that. Um, it's probably one of the project skills that people lack the most. And I've seen that in my consulting. I've seen it with managements who are unable to say no, and who then get their staff into all kinds of trouble. And with people themselves unable to say no, and getting themselves into trouble, getting themselves into situations that are not really acceptable situations, but that they couldn't resist. It's a tutorial I've wanted to do for quite a long time. I originally, Jerry Weinberg did it at AYE, starting with a birds of a feather session, and then he expanded it into a tutorial, and I was his assistant several times in that. And I've always been very interested in doing it myself. So, with Jerry's permission, I went ahead and did it. I did it rather differently from the way he does it, but there were some similar elements, I think.
Okay, the common theme running through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and did anything interesting come out of your tutorial?
Something interesting always comes out.
Of course.
Um, the fascinating thing for me about experiential tutorials is that we all learn. I love doing them because I learn a lot from the participants and from the interactions. A couple of quite interesting things came out. One of them being that one of the participants who had bravely volunteered to role play his own situation, then told me just towards the end of the conference that he had a conversation with his boss, essentially said no, and accepted another job offer.
Oh wow!
And was very excited about that. And I think that's quite wonderful. It's really great when you see something quite that direct. When you do a tutorial or a session and it's really timely for someone.
Yes, so they are right in that moment, so you can see what they're thinking and feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And you can a direct impact for once. I mean, it's not always that you see a direct impact from a session of any kind, but in this case, it seemed to be almost quite direct. So that was great. And of course, he gained from everyone in that session, including the person who did the role play with him and played against him, and apparently, I think had experience in the same company and did a wonderful job, to all accounts, of role playing that other person.
Oh wow, that's good. Yeah, that's one advantage of the experiential session, isn't it? If you've got a willing volunteer who
Yes.
is going to put themselves and simulate. Well, it's not even a simulation, is it? If they're reenacting what they're going through at work at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like coaching from the whole group, isn't it?
It is. It is, and it's very brave of someone to want to do that, to volunteer to do that. For this particular session, I made sure I had a backup. Not to have a backup for a person who wanted to learn to say no, but a backup for a person who would play the horrible person trying to get them to say yes.
Right.
And Henrik Anderson Henke was a wonderful volunteer for that, and he did a couple of role plays and was just extraordinary. So that really added to the session as well.
Extraordinarily, like bad, as in angry boss, or just
Oh, he was vile. He was wonderfully vile. He and I talked beforehand about some of the things to do, and he did a lot of the things that I in fact had done as Jerry's assistant. What makes it, I think, particularly effective is the ability to switch from one style to another. So he asked what style the person he was playing
right.
exhibits, but he also switched between manipulating and bullying and being terribly, terribly reasonable, and of course doing all of those things conveys a very different effect and puts someone in a very difficult position when they're trying to resist.
Which I guess is what you need, isn't it, to feel the full force of an awkward position.
Indeed. And if you're not the person doing the role play, to witness.
Oh, crikey, yes. I mean, there's one thing I've learned from experiential. I'm sold hook, line and sinker in experiential sessions. And even if you're not directly partaking, you're partaking as an observer because you're just watching the interaction unfold in whatever way it's going to unfold. And you can almost see it happening, can't you? Because you are that little bit removed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, experiential sessions are a really powerful way to teach and to learn. And I was thinking about this today because in preparation for this conversation, they engage so much more of your senses, so many more of your senses than simply sitting and listening to someone talk. So you get the audio, but you also get visual in a very different way from watching a video or watching slides or something. But you also get a sort of kinesthetic feel, depending, of course, on what you're doing in an experiential session. If you're building something, then you certainly get a very direct kinesthetic experience. But in fact, if you're watching something that has a certain amount of emotional power or you're participating in that, there's also a visceral effect, which I think is kind of kinesthetic. So I find that all of that very interesting. And the fact that it does engage so much more of you means that you are much more likely, I believe, to gain something from the experience. And of course, you're only going to gain what you're ready to learn, and what is right for you to learn at the time.
Yes. Sorry. No, carry on. I talked over. Sorry.
That's okay. That's what I really like, in fact, about doing an experiential session at Let's Test or at CAST. In some other conferences, people are more reluctant to participate. And there's a great deal of openness in the participants at Let's Test.
Yeah. You hear that? You hear there's more openness in the sessions, but they are a lot more quiet the audience is a lot more quiet to speak up in open season.
At Let's Test?
Yes, at Let's Test, sorry, yeah. There's like a contrast there.
More quiet than what? Than they are in sessions?
Mind you, this is probably coming from Paul Holland. Yeah, he's just saying that the audience is a lot quieter and less willing to ask questions in open season in the kind of after session than they are more willing to open up in the session itself, like the experiential one that you were running.
That's really interesting. I hadn't necessarily observed that. The facilitation model that Paul teaches and that Let's Test has adopted and that CAST uses is in some ways oddly formal. And it may be that some people find that intimidating.
Yeah, that's interesting.
They may or may not. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. I quite like it because it allows people, going off topic a little bit, but the facilitation allows people to have their say, or at least gives them more of a chance than an actual, if it was open season, everyone was just hurling abuse left, right and centre.
I certainly think it's better than people hurling abuse. But I think the value of that kind of facilitated model is the way the threads play out, so that all of the comments on and questions on one thread are dealt with together before you move on to another one. That I think is very useful because it allows for a more rich discussion than you might have if you were jumping around from one thing to another. On the other hand, sometimes I suspect the jumping around might also have its virtues.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, it's harder to manage, isn't it, if you've got a controversial speaker who raises some controversial points.
Yeah, and of course, if you have people who are willing to engage in controversy.
Of course, yeah. And just sort of going back to the experiential model, I've noticed it takes a very skillful leader to run a experiential session, more so than someone just standing up in front of some slides. but the better the presenter, if you will, or the person running the session, the easier they make it look. I don't know if you understand my point. It's so hard. I mean, from the session I try to run experiential one, or I try to do a hybrid, and it's just, I've got a lot of feedback from it. But when you look at the likes of you, the likes of Steve Smith and Jerry and Johanna and Esther, the way they run a session, they make it look easy.
Mm-hmm.
But it is actually a lot harder than just standing up and presenting a slide deck to an inactive audience.
It's very difficult because you have to exert control and yet let go.
Yes.
You need to be very aware of what's going on and to be ready to steer in gently in one direction or another without interfering with what's going on, unless it's something really negative. So and you have to be really open to completely having your agenda hijacked if that's the right thing for the session. And that's where the energy is among the participants. So I find it fascinating. It's really interesting to do.
What if that energy is not going the way that you was hoping it would go, and it was going in like the wrong direction?
What means that? Well, I don't know what the wrong direction is. That's going to depend on the session.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, I definitely had an agenda, and what I was worried about, I wanted to let it go, but the fear of it going down a route and then me not getting the right message across, if you will, or the message I wanted to convey across. I don't know, it just made me sort of, hang on a minute, I need to get control of this again.
One of the things that I learned from Jerry Weinberg, I've been in a lot of Jerry's experiential sessions. I got to be his assistant in quite a lot of his experiential sessions at AYE. And then also I was a participant in his designing experiential sessions workshop, which was a week long. About 3 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was in it. And I'm just losing the thread of this now. But one of the one of the most important things that Jerry talks about is not to steer a class to a foregone conclusion.
Okay.
That the conclusion is their own, whatever that's going to be. And it might not be the one that you expected. And in fact, I've been in some experiential sessions, including at AYE actually, where I felt the presenter was trying to steer to a foregone conclusion, and it spoiled the session for me. It really didn't work.
I can see that. I can see why that would make you feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Right, okay, that's something to think about. Thank you. So you also did a session as well on test leadership heuristics.
Yeah, I did that as a workshop.
Okay.
I'm not all that keen. I mean, it's kind of fun to do a keynote, because that's quite a different performance, if you like. But I'm not all that keen on standing up with a bunch of slides and blathering about them. I'm much more interested in engaging with a group of participants. And I love doing workshops as well as experiential sessions. So what we did in the test leadership heuristics workshop was very simple. I asked people to divide into groups. I think I had them in groups of 4 or 5 is kind of how it played out. And I asked each group, I did a little intro on what do we mean by a heuristic. And we talked about rules of thumb and various other meanings of a heuristic. But, and then I asked each group to come up with one or more heuristics for leadership, test leadership, and to think of 3 circumstances and ways in which they could be very effective and work and 3 ways in which they might not be appropriate or might not work or might fail. Most of the groups came up with only one. A couple of groups came up with 2 or 3. So very interesting because it got them thinking about what a heuristic is, which was really my intention.
Yeah.
So it was partly thinking about leadership and what are the important things about leadership, but also what is it about a heuristic that is important? And of course, it's the fact that it is a model or a rule of thumb, but it's fallible.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to work. Not everything that you want to do as a leader is going to work with everyone or in every circumstance. So that was really the point of that one.
And did you get any interesting stories out of it? Was there any kind of standout moments for you or not?
Not really. I think each group came up with something quite interesting and quite different, which is always fun.
Yeah.
And each group, now that's interesting actually. Each group, of course, interacted differently. So that's always fascinating to observe as you see a group figuring out what they're going to do. So in some cases, you see one person emerge as the facilitator of a particular group, if you like. In some cases, they're the leader. In some cases, they're simply facilitating. There was one group that spent nearly the entire hour grappling with what the problem was about, and only coming to some kind of solution towards the end. And I'm not sure quite why that was. It was interesting. All really bright people and really passionate people, but I think that they were all people who are not comfortable with being put on the spot and with solving a problem quickly.
Okay.
So that's interesting too, and you find that sometimes actually in an experiential session too, with some people who simply are not prepared to take on a role all of a sudden. If you told them about it 3 days in advance, they might be.
Yeah. So how were the groups formed? Did they form themselves, or did you go around and just put them into a group, or?
Some of them form themselves.
Right. So they would have been strangers in the group as well to each other.
Yeah, and that of course is also quite often a really interesting dynamic. So last year at Let's Test, I did a full day tutorial on test leadership, and there the first exercise I did was a small group exercise, and I had people form again into small groups of 4, and I asked them to come up with a scenario that they could all relate to, where test leadership had been called for, whether or not it was exerted, and whether or not it was exerted by somebody who was officially the leader.
Okay.
And to come up with what characteristics, and I emphasized personal characteristics, if you like, as well as skills, had made that person effective in that situation, or not effective in that situation. And if not effective, what might have made that person effective? So in that case, people tended to gravitate towards working with people they already knew.
Right.
The second exercise, which was really the core of the tutorial, I divided the class down the middle and had each side develop a problem in test leadership for the other side to solve, with some formal observers and so on. In that case, I deliberately had them number off, just 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and divided them into groups that way. So they weren't necessarily working with people they knew.
Okay.
And you do get a quite different dynamic when you do that, I think.
Do you find that you get the extroverts being a bit more extroverts and the introverts being a bit more introverts?
That tends to happen in a large group anyway.
Right.
And the one thing that I felt I could have done better with that class was at the end when we did the final debrief on the session, instead of going around the whole circle and asking people for their light bulb moments, which I think put the introverts, at least some of the more extreme introverts, on the spot, and that some of them preferred to pass.
Yeah.
It would have been better to give them all index cards and say, write down up to three light bulb moments and toss it in the middle, and then have people just pick random cards and read them. Because then each person could have quietly thought about it for themselves and not felt every eye was on them.
Yes.
While they were trying to do that. So and I would certainly do that in the future.
Yeah, that's good. We had a similar thing with retrospectives at my previous company. You just get the same people making the same noises. And so we just had to change the model so that other people got a chance to speak, if it will, through written word. But at least they got their voice heard then. But yeah, that's good. Excellent. Okay, so obviously now let's test Oz.
Yeah.
Big deal. So you're the keynote, which is a fantastic honour. Sorry?
It is.
Good. And so, are you doing any other sessions as well, or are you just doing a keynote and then going to enjoy the sunshine?
I'm going to do a tutorial as well.
Oh, fantastic. Cool. And have you got any ideas what the keynote will be about yet, or do you wait and see what's burning closer to the time?
Probably a bit of both. It is more than a year away. And I'm not a long-term planner. Particularly, I always find it outrageous when some conferences want your slides 6 months in advance. Like, how on earth do I know what I'm going to say 6 months from now?
Yes.
So, and quite often, in fact, when I am doing a tutorial and an experiential session, I change the exercises the day before. So, I don't want to commit to a keynote topic right now.
No.
I'm thinking about something about context, but I'm not sure what yet. So I have a number of ideas that I kind of want to work through.
Right. And I guess you can try those ideas out within over the next year, see how they pan out.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And what would you say you're looking forward to most about Let's Test Oz?
Well, I don't know. I think the opportunity to engage with a quite different group, because of course it's so expensive to go to or from Australia. You don't get nearly as many Australian participants at either European or North American conferences. I know there are some really wonderful testers in Australia, and I'm really looking forward to meeting them and engaging with them.
Have you ever been to Australia in a formal capacity?
I've never been there at all.
Oh,
so I'm very excited about that.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
We spent a few days in Brisbane, and we visited the Gold Coast for a day. It's lovely.
Okay.
But yeah, fear of sharks took me out of the water though.
Well, that's a shame.
Yeah, it's a bit.
After you were in the Baltic, I
think the worst thing it would get me there would be a mud skipper or something.
Yeah, probably.
That's it. Fantastic. So yeah, the lineup looks good, doesn't it? We've got Keith Klein booked in, James back. You got the Scott Barber and Dawn Haynes as well doing a piece.
Okay.
Because I say it'd be good. I've not seen much of Keith Klein other than he's just bubbled up onto Twitter most recently, and it's good, a good source of information for me.
Yeah, he's on the he is or was on the CAST board of directors, or the AST board of directors rather, and I saw him at Star Canada this year. Good speaker.
Okay, cool. How long forward to him? Sorry.
Yeah. I just said he has interesting ideas, and he's doing some interesting things at the Barclays Bank. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk to him at some point, especially about his STEP program, which sounds quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from beginning to end. Fantastic. Okay, so that's it. So let's test. Obviously, very good. Have you got anything else you'd like to discuss before we hang up?
I don't think so, thank you. Um, I think I've hit on the things that really matter to me about Let's Test, and the things that I'm really looking forward to at Let's Test Oz. Um, yeah, I think those are my main preoccupations right now about Let's Test.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I really appreciate your time, Fiona. It's great to speak to you again.
Okay, great to speak to you too. Thank you, Duncan.
No, and we'll catch up soon.
Okay,
Cheerio. Bye bye.
bye bye.